May I have your attention, please? Good morning. I'm Hale Esfandiari. I run the Middle East program at the Wilson Center. I would like to welcome you on behalf of my colleague, Sonia Michel, the director of the United States Studies program, and myself to today's meeting on women and entrepreneurship, perspectives from the Middle East and the United States. Today's meeting is a joint effort of the Middle East program, the United States Studies program, and the PAGE program at the center. And we are grateful to my colleague Kent Hughes, the director of the PAGE program, who lended his support in putting together this meeting. Let me start with a few words about the Wilson Center. The Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars was established by an act of Congress in 1968 and is the nation's official living memorial to President Woodrow Wilson. The center is a nonpartisan institute for policy-relevant research and dialogue. We bring together the thinkers and the doers, the policymakers, scholars, and business leaders in the hope that an open dialogue will lead to better understanding, cooperation, and public policy. The center hosts several hundred meetings each year. Today, it's a privilege to have with us a group of American businesswomen and their counterparts from the Middle East. In the past, the Middle East program has convened a number of meetings with women entrepreneurs from the Middle East in the region. Nadire Shamlou, who is going to join us any minute, and is a senior advisor to the chief economist at the World Bank, helped us in putting together those meetings, and we are indebted to her for having introduced to us our participants from the region for our past and current meetings. Two of the participants, Hanan Saab from Lebanon and Lina Hamrale for Jordan, who happened to be on the first panel, are old friends and have attended our meetings in the region. We are delighted to welcome them in our home. My two colleagues, Amy Wilkinson, who is currently a public policy scholar at the Center and senior fellow at the Center for Business and Government at Harvard University, and Sonia Michel will chair the first and second panel. The first panel will deal with women running businesses, large and small, and the second panel will cover resources for women entrepreneurs. We have allocated 90 minutes for each panel in order to have enough time for the Q&A and discussions. We have had 92 RSVPs, and I believe people will be drifting in during the session. Our special thanks goes to Tammy Longaberger, a former member of the Board of Trustees of the Wilson Center and a supporter of our gender program all along. She's the CEO of the Longaberger Company she's going to take part in the first panel and also giving us the closing remarks. I would also like to thank Lynn and Bob Johnston from the Educational Venture Foundation for the support of all our meetings on women entrepreneurs in the region and the US. We have distributed the bios of the speakers and the chairs in order to save time. We are really on a very tight schedule. The opening remarks would be made by Mr. Mark Dahms, who is the Chief Economist of the Economics and Statistic Administration at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And he worked previously as a senior economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and also in the Research and Statistic Division of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. He also spent time at the OECD and in the early 1990s worked at the Center for Economic Studies at the Census Bureau. His research has focused on the effect of technology adoption and innovation and firm productivity, housing market conditions, consumer spending, and entrepreneurship. He has published in a variety of outlets, and he holds a PhD in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a BA from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in mathematics and economics. Mr. Dahms?
Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. As I said, my name is Mark Dahms. I'm the Chief Economist of the Department of Commerce. And there's a question of, so why am I here today? And one of the reasons I was invited. But one of the reasons I'm here today is because the Department of Commerce, we actually collect a lot of data. And we collect a lot of data on demographics of our population. We also collect a lot of data on businesses of our business population. And so today when we're talking about women in entrepreneurship, we're talking about an overlap of those two data sets. And what I'd like to do today is talk about primarily just about what do we actually know about women-owned businesses in the United States, how these things have changed over time. So before I talk about the reports that were out in the lobby, and I hope that you take, and let me just hold them up. I hope you take them because they weigh a lot, and we don't want to have to schlep them back. So there's the Women in America report that was just released by the White House, and then there's women-owned businesses in the 21st century. So the fact that we're having this conference right after we did these reports is quite fortuitous. Let me just talk about entrepreneurship a little bit and how important it is in the U.S. economy, because I think when we're talking about the United States versus the Middle East, I think there's potential for interesting contrast here. About every year in the United States, we have about 500 to 600,000 new employer businesses starting. Those businesses employ about 3 million people. So that's quite an inflow into the workforce, about 130 million every year. So that's really quite a dynamic economy that we're facing. One thing that we also know in the United States is that if we look at these 500 to 600,000 businesses that start every year, and again, these are employer businesses, this isn't the self-employed, about half of those will be gone in about 5 years. And so for the entrepreneurs who are up here on the stage and elsewhere, we know that entrepreneurial is an inherently risky activity. And that's just something, I think that's part of maybe the American DNA, but the data very much support this. And when we look at entrepreneurship and these 3 million new jobs that are created every year, that's really important for overall U.S. job creation. On average, on net, the U.S. adds about a million or so jobs a year. Our population's increasing, and forget about the business cycles at the moment. So these new businesses are really important in terms of the amount of jobs that we create every year in our economy. So they play a very, very important role. And what you'll notice is in the administration and in the public more generally, you'll just hear a lot more. You're hearing a lot more about entrepreneurship and its importance. So I think finally that the rhetoric and the administration and the attention entrepreneurship is receiving now is commensurate to their contribution to the overall economy. And we all know that entrepreneurship is really important in terms of innovation and all those other good things. So that's kind of using data. That's kind of what we know about entrepreneurship in very broad brush strokes. So now let's just talk about then the overlap between entrepreneurship and women. So what do we actually know about female entrepreneurs in the United States? So we issued this report, one of those ones I just held up, about women-owned businesses. And what we tried to do is we just scoured all the data sources out there and tried to write a coherent summary as to what do we actually know. So we're focusing mainly on women-owned businesses, and that's what I'll be focused on today. And this data comes from lots of different sources. And the overall conclusion is that, in some sense, progress, we can talk about what we mean by progress a little bit, has been made, but there's still very, very large disparities when we look at women-owned businesses versus men-owned businesses in the United States. Second, I want to talk a little bit more about that second report, which is just a conglomeration of statistics about women in general in the labor force and elsewhere. And what do we know about education of women, because that's very important in terms of entrepreneurship, and also what do we know about their labor force participation rates. So again, we released this report. And this report just, again, summarizes data from lots of different sources, and I'm going to present just just a small bit of it that could be very important when we're talking about entrepreneurship. And the reason we're going to be looking especially at education is that when we look at these large disparities in entrepreneurship between men and women, the question is why does that exist? And there's lots of reasons out there, and you probably know much more about those reasons than I do. But one of the reasons why these large disparities could exist is because of differences in educational attainment. So that's why we're going to focus on that a little bit. Okay, so let's go to the first report. And so this is, in terms of the two reports, I don't care so much about this one. It doesn't weigh as much as the second. So you can leave that one behind. But a couple of the authors of the report are actually here in the audience. So what is a woman-owned business? Let's just make sure that we're on the same terms, we're using the right terminology. And again, really what I'm trying to do here is just kind of lay the groundwork. What are the basic facts that we can all agree to? So when we have this discussion later this morning, we're all using the kind of that same benchmark going forward. So what's a woman-owned business? Well, there's kind of two definitions, and it gets a little messy. First, there's self-employed. So you can start your own business. You can be your own employer and your own employee, and you can wear pajamas all day. So I'm very envious of these people. So that's one form of women-owned businesses, and that's going to account for a lot of them. That's true for men as well. And then you can also have privately held companies where you have employees, where women own a majority of the business. So if you have a couple dentists get together and they form a practice, if a majority of the ownership of that dental practice is females, then we would say that's a woman-owned business. So what's not included here then are large publicly traded companies, because there the distinction between male-owned and female-owned doesn't make as much sense because the company is owned by its shareholders, and we just don't have information on that. So when we're talking about women-owned businesses, we tend to talk about fairly small businesses, or just privately held businesses. And sometimes these privately held businesses sometimes can be large if you're talking about like large law firms or something like that. But they actually tend to be small. But we're not talking about the GMs or the IBMs. Well, GM's not as big as it used to be, but you know what I'm talking about. So this is a figure that basically says what fraction of workers are self-employed by gender over time. And the big thing that I take away from this figure is that the difference between men and women in terms of becoming self-employed is huge. And it really hasn't narrowed much over time. It's been very, very persistent. And when we think about self-employment, I think there's really two ways to think about this. And it's a good and a bad. It's a supply and it's a demand. And one reason why people become self-employed is because they want to. Because they think the opportunities of self-employment are really great. They think they're going to have a great return on that investment. And that's kind of the good thing. That's kind of the real entrepreneurial spirit. So that's kind of the positive side of self-employment. The negative side of self-employment is you become self-employed because the marketplace doesn't offer you enough options. So you may want a certain amount of flexibility, or whatever, and so you become self-employed because you can't find a job in the marketplace that meets your needs. So when we look at these data, it's really hard to distinguish between those two stories. But when we look at these differences going forward, I think that's something really important to keep in mind in how those two stories may differ by gender. So again, if you look at this figure, you just see these large persistent differences between men and women. So basically the self-employment rate of men is not twice as high as women, but it's substantially larger. Now in this horribly hard to read table, there's just a lot of information then about the differences between men and women, between the self-employed and the non-self-employed. And let me just highlight a couple of the key figures. Basically, if you look at women and men who are self-employed, their educational backgrounds are pretty similar. So there's not much of a difference there. Their age distribution is pretty similar too. Marital status varies by a little bit. But if you look at down at the bottom, and this is the thing that is the real shocker. If you look at those last three rows, what you'll see is that men who are self-employed tend to work more hours per week than women, by about 15% or so. But if you look at the second to bottom row, you look at average annual earnings of the self-employed men versus self-employed women, there's just like this huge difference, right? So there you're talking about $38,000 a year versus $70,000 a year. So we all know about, wage disparities between men and women, and I can talk about that later perhaps if you want. But this is just a really large difference. And the big question is, okay, why does this difference exist? So we'll go through a bunch more of information, but I think that's the question that we really want the answer to. So let's go ahead and now let's just take a look again at this is using different data, and I don't mean to be confusing here, but it gives you just another sense of kind of the importance of self-employed women. So what you'll see here is that the share of businesses that are privately held, that are owned by women, has been increasing over time. So the overall number of businesses has been increasing quite a bit. But if you look at that female slice, it is increasing. It's still quite below the share of men. And what we notice, though, is there's that dark blue bar at the top. So those are businesses that are equally owned by men and women. So if you have a husband and wife who own a store, okay, then that would be equally owned. So there's a fair number of those. But nonetheless, the female share, it's increasing, but there's still quite a big difference. Okay. Another way we can cut the data is let's look at this by minority status. And here what we notice is that if we look at the number of firms that are owned by minorities, those tend to be the two shorter bars, the fraction that are owned by women tend to be a little bit higher than the population as a whole. So minority women tend to be business owners a little more so than non-minority women. Okay, now, this is consistent with the result that self-employed women tend to earn a lot less than men. So this is just the amount of sales and receipts by gender for women-owned businesses versus men-owned businesses. And what you'll notice is the dark blue bars, which represent women, that's really skewed to the left, and the lighter bars, which represent men-owned businesses, is a little more skewed to the right. So men-owned businesses tend to have a lot more revenue. And it's really striking once you look at $50,000 a year and above. So for instance, if you look at $1 million more a year, 6.2% of male-owned businesses have revenue of over $1 million, whereas it's only 1.8% of women-owned businesses. So that's really quite a big difference. And again, the big question I think to have today that we can talk about is why does that difference exist? So now one reason it might exist is men and women choose to work in different industries. That's a possibility. And indeed, we notice there are really big differences in entrepreneurship by gender, by industry. So what this chart does is it kind of ranks women-owned businesses in terms of number. The highest is on the far left, and it goes down to the right. And again, the women-owned data is in the dark blue bars. And what you'll notice is that the one industry where women-owned businesses outnumber men-owned businesses is in healthcare and education. And it's quite stark. And then we start going down, and then you'll notice like just a stereotype you see construction, where men-owned businesses make up 90% of all businesses versus only 10% for women. So we notice that there are these large differences. And if you look at occupation data, which is on here, if you look at occupation by gender, there have been changes over time, but that's also remarkably static. If you look at the fraction of women that make up nurses and school teachers, that's really high, and it's been really high for a long, long time. So you can look at those figures, which again, we don't have here today, and look at those and say, well, there's some change, or you can look at those and say, wow, those are just remarkably persistent. And I think if we were to take this data backwards, which we can't go really far back in time, I think we would see that this is something that's very persistent and is very slow changing. And it's an interesting question. Why is it so slow changing? Okay. And now let me go to the second report, which is this Women in America, Indicators of Social and Economic Well-Being. If you watched NBC Nightly News a couple weeks ago, this was the lead story for 5 minutes. So since you all probably watched that, I don't have to talk about it very much. I'll send you the video clip if you want. It's on my computer, at home and at work. And so basically what this report does is it takes a lot of statistics about women and it puts it into 5 big categories. So people, families, and income is kind of chapter 1. Education, which is the stuff I'm going to talk about, is chapter 2. And then just about employment in general. I'll talk about that just a little bit more. And then health and crime and violence. So it's really a nice compendium of pretty much from a government point of view, what do we know about women in the United States today? So the authors who are sitting here as well will autograph the later, and then you can sell it on eBay. We have Cass and Jackie sitting there, so I don't want to embarrass them too much. So let's talk about education for a little bit. I find this education stuff just really fascinating because there really have been, although there hasn't been big changes in the male-female wage gap or kind of in the industry distribution of where women entrepreneurs start versus men, but there have been pretty big changes in educational attainment. And so what we show here is over 40 years, the fraction of men and women and what type of degrees they have. So the first thing you notice is those dark blue bars at the bottom. Those just shrunk a lot. That's less than high school. So overall, kind of despite what we hear in the press, high school graduation rates, completion rates have actually gone up over time. Slowly, and it doesn't mean that we still have a long way to go, but that's just a fact. And so that occurred for both men and women about equally. Where you notice the biggest difference in changes over time between men and women are the upper parts of these bars. And those upper parts of the bars are bachelor's education and graduate degrees. So if you go back to 1970, many more men relative to women received some sort of graduate degree versus women, whereas in 2009, those numbers have kind of equalized. This is the fraction of the population with these degrees. And we'll show some more data later showing that it's kind of improved even further. Kind of ditto for bachelor's degrees. And again, we'll show a graph in just a second. A lot more women are going to college now than they used to. And that increase is much larger for women than it has been for men. So when we look at these differences in entrepreneurship between men and women over time, we see that based on that one rough figure, we didn't see a big change over time, but we do have a lot of changing in education. So again, it kind of begs the question, okay, why don't we see more women entering entrepreneurship? So when we're thinking about education, another way to think about it is, kind of what's happening, recently. And so we're just going to look at a younger cohort. We're going to look at 25 to 34-year-olds. That previous figure was for the entire kind of working population. So let's just focus on the younger folks. And what we see is that the fraction of women who have a bachelor's degree or more now exceeds that of men, and by a good bit. Those lines crossed sometime in the mid-1990s. But this is consistent with what you hear, that if you look at enrollment rates at colleges, there are more women than there are men. So that's just a fact. And another thing I was noticing about this, if you look at the line for males, it's been kind of flat, throughout the 2000s. Let me turn this around. No. Okay. And whereas women, they're still steadily increasing. So that's a very interesting trend. Another interesting trend is, let's just look at 2 or more years of graduate study. Okay, so these are folks who are getting MBAs, law degrees, or PhDs or whatnot. And for a long time, the ratio, if you go back to the late 60s, the ratio of men to women who had graduate degrees was like a 4-to-1 ratio. So now women outnumber men in terms of these graduate degrees. Now, in terms of the graduate degrees, I was reading about this recently, there are still some interesting differences by field of study. We're going to show a graph of field of study in just a second. But I think what's true, perhaps somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, like if you look at dental school, veterinary school, law school, men and women, I believe, have parity, or women have an edge. I think in medical school, men still have an edge. So there are differences by field, but there has been a lot of progress made on the education front. So in terms of field of study then, here's a graph with like 10 different colors. And so what do we take away from this? One thing to take away is that although education rates for women have increased a lot over time, and now women are surpassing men by measures of kind of these gross measures, do you have a BA or do you have a graduate degree or not, there are still some pretty big persistent differences, though, in the field of study. So if we look at the bottom bars, the engineering and computer sciences, we still see that stereotype kind of male-dominated field. That's still true, and that hasn't changed much over time, or at least over this 10-year period. And ditto, if you look at these other fields, the ranking of men to women, that really hasn't changed that much over this 10-year window. So although women are receiving a lot more education than they used to, they're pursuing a lot more education, the distribution of the different fields that they're studying hasn't changed that much for women or for men. So I think that's an interesting question. Okay, why is that the case? I don't have an answer, but I think it's an interesting question to pose. Finally, I think this is my last slide. Let's talk about labor force participation. So unfortunately, this is just a horrible phrase economists use. And what labor force participation means that you either have a job or you're looking for a job. And what we do is we say, okay, well, let's look at the entire population. What fraction of people have a job or are looking for a job? And you hear about labor force participation rate these days because it has a lot to do with the unemployment rate. So if you have people just dropping out of the labor force, that looks like that will have the effect of making the unemployment rate fall. That's kind of what's happened recently. There's a lot of those people. And as the economy ramps back up, we expect labor force participation to start increasing again. But that has nothing to do with this graph, which basically says that if we look at the labor market, the U.S. labor market since World War II, the single biggest change that we probably saw was the increase in female labor force participation rates. I mean, it really has been stark. And if we look at the inflow into the U.S. workforce, this is one of the biggest sources that we've seen. So what's going to happen in the future? I don't know. Are these lines going to converge? I don't know. As you can see, though, these lines tend to move somewhat slowly over time. So if they are going to converge, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you look at the most recent recession, one thing that was really quite stark is the unemployment rate of men has exceeded that of women. That's in part because construction, if you remember back to one of the previous graphs, how men really dominate the construction industry, at least in terms of ownership, that got really walloped, as did manufacturing. So those are certainly factors. But in terms of the labor market, there has been a lot more parity over time, though I think when we look at these measures of entrepreneurship, there are these somewhat big differences. So what are my conclusions? One, please take copies of the reports. So basically, progress has been made in a number of fronts in terms of these measures we're talking about, but there's still some large disparities. We look at earnings of men versus women, especially in the self-employed. We see really big differences. Just the propensity to start businesses, from everything that we know, men still greatly outnumber women by any measure, and by some data sets that I didn't even talk about. And then you look at the size of businesses, which is related to earnings. Men-owned businesses still tend to be much larger. There are still these big distributional differences in what types of businesses do men and women start. But if we look at education, we see that women kind of out-educate men now. But there are still these big differences in the field of study. So we haven't done the analysis of, does the differences in field of study influence the propensity to start businesses? So that is, if you're kind of the stereotypical computer scientist, therefore you're more likely to be male. And if computer scientists are more likely to start businesses on their own, maybe that explains part of the difference. So we don't know that. Just looking at the numbers, I'm going to be surprised if that explains much of the difference, but it's going to be one of the factors. And differences in the participation rate in labor markets, that's really narrowed quite a bit. So I'm going to end with, so why do these differences still exist? Discrimination in any number of ways is one of the reasons that's often cited. Proving discrimination, I'm going to put on my statistical hat here, is really, really hard to show. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's really, really hard to prove. Could be just preferences. Then that raises a question about why do different genders have different preferences when it comes to either starting businesses or their participation in the labor market. And then finally, I just don't know, but I assume that you guys will be able to tell me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So Don will take some questions, both from the floor and from our panelists. Lina, you go for, just
Yes.
identify yourself.
Yes, Lina Handele from Jordan. Really, I am looking at the study. There is a lot of similarity in our country. Yes. If you look at, for instance, most of women are in the education and the health, we have the same. If you look at 80% of our graduates from university are women, it's there. But the way what they study is the difference. And actually in the labor market, the thing is we don't want the quantity of women in the labor market. We want the quality of their position. And because they think in our country that the career path of the woman is very short, for this reason, she is not giving the chance, a fair chance to upgrade her skills. So even though we see a lot of similarities, but still, as you said, nothing, we need to reach in a way that better than the situation. Why it's not happening? Is it that we are not in the agenda? We are not in the decision making with the males to see what we need? We are not there to present our case. We don't lobby. So I think it's really crucial to find the right recipe. Why we are doing so many things, but still it's not in a healthy situation.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine myself getting into trouble in many ways.
No. Yes, you're outnumbered.
No. Let me say the following, though. So if we look at male and female wage differentials, how much women earn versus men earned, we know that there's a difference. We know that when we look at it a little more closely and we start saying, well, why do those differences exist? Do those differences exist because of years in the labor force? Does it exist because of education? We notice that then those wage differentials, which you often hear in the press is like 30% or something like that, will get narrowed down to about 10%. And what's really interesting about what happens in the United States in terms of this question is that that remaining 10% differential, we can't explain that away, and it's persistent. So that 10% differential, in the 70s it was much larger, and then when we do our fancy statistics, it goes down. But since the 90s, this differential's been flat. And so we don't have a very good idea as to why that's the case. And what some people speculate is this attachment to the labor force. So if an employer hires a woman, and if they perceive that, the attachment to the labor force of women is going to be less than men, maybe then they'll make less investments in the human capital of women relative to men. And so that's one of the reasons why it's speculated that these wage differentials still exist. So I don't think I said anything wrong there.
No.
Won't be killed.
Mr. Dems, I might offer a comment I'm not sure where it fits in the discussion, but I have often wondered if the government or commerce or society in general could place a value on the work women do at home and calculate that. Because for myself, who own a business, who need to work outside the home, I have to pay an enormous amount of money to get the work done at home that I am not able to do. Or I come home at night and start my second job, which things just have to be done in the home. And I would say, with all due respect, I think women have, I guess I would call it an advantage over men in their skill set and their opportunities to do that work.
Yes.
And that's not captured anyplace.
So it's not capturing a place, but this is a really big topic of conversation. And being a good economist, I'll take an interesting topic and make it sound really boring. So we call it the value of home production. People are trying to place a value on this because
Yes.
These payments that people are making to provide
Domestic
traditionally services provided by individuals, that's receiving increasing attention. More and more dollars are flowing to this. And so if we're thinking about how much does our society produce, well, there is the stuff we produce at home. And so that should be added. And so that's actually a pretty big conversation in terms of how do we fold this into the national accounts. And one of the reasons why this has become a hot topic as well is when we do surveys of people and we ask them, well, how do you spend your non-work time? What we notice is that there are these really interesting trends about how much time do you spend on home production and then how much do you actually pay other people to do that. And if you look at the expenditures people pay to do this home production, that's increased over time. So when dollars are spent, hey, we measure that in GDP. But what about these non-market-based activities which do have value? So those should be folded in as well. And so I'm actually having lunch with a guy today. We're talking about, how do we expand our idea of like GDP? And this is actually an important part of that.
Great.
Just wait for the mic.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Elizabeth Vasquez with We Connect International. And outside of the home, there's also the issue of owning the means of production. And there's very little information or data on women's ownership of the means of production. You can't really make money without money. You can't really build a company if you don't own the means to produce products that have huge wealth or value placed on it by society. So what's being done to collect information? I once saw a statistic years ago that women own less than 1% of the means of production globally. I don't know how they calculated it, and I don't know what's being done to provide a more accurate assessment of women's ownership of the means of production. But I think that that's one of the key pieces that we're not talking about, but that's going to be hugely critical if we're ever to make real wealth.
Yeah. So in the United States, I don't know the number. It's going to be small because women make up a minority of small businesses, and small businesses makes up a minority of total wealth in the United States. So we're just going to get small numbers there. One thing that we're really interested in, we are getting better data on, and I didn't talk about it here, is women's access to capital. And so in one of these reports, we do present some statistics on women's access to capital, and that's an issue that receives a lot of attention, and there's studies been done on that. There's this group called the Kauffman Foundation, which is sponsored a survey and basically asks, where do you get your capital from? And most small businesses, they don't get bank loans. I blew through this graph, and perhaps we could have gone back to it. Instead, most small businesses start by tapping their own resources. And one thing that was really bad about this past recession was that a lot of people would tap their home equity to start businesses, and now home equity is a lot lower than it used to be. So that hurts both men and women quite a bit. When I was looking at these data, though, if you look at the access to capital, and this is recently, we're not talking about what the case was a couple of decades ago, I was actually struck by how much little difference there is. That's a horrible sentence. I was struck by the small differences between men and women in terms of where they got their capital to start their businesses. I mean, there's some differences, but you're talking about just a couple percentage points by category. So I don't know if that means that there's maybe more equality there than in other areas. But I mean, this is something that we'll look at more closely in the future.
Okay, Sonia, and that would be the last question.
Just going back to Sonia Michelle from the Wilson Center. Just going back to Tammy's point about the work that women do in the home and the value placed on it. One of the most important things, of course, is childcare. And I was struck by, I think I saw in your chart about the differences between men and women who were self-employed. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of difference in terms of who had children. Is that right?
Yeah, so that I found that actually kind
What do you make
of
of that?
that's kind of surprising. And what we could do, which we really haven't done, is if we look at people who are self-employed with children, are they doing different types of self-employment? So if you, I'm just thinking this is what I might find, but
Could
or
account
what
for
we might
the difference
find.
in hours.
It really could. And so there you're doing self-employed because you're doing this kind of part-time work if you have, because we know that women do work fewer hours than men who are self-employed. So maybe if there are small children, the self-employment rate's not different, but the type of employment you're doing, you're not starting your own business. Instead, you're just doing a little bit something on the side. And then, maybe that explains part of the wage differentials too. You're partaking work that's incredibly flexible. And so then if you have work that's incredibly flexible, it's probably going to be lower paid. So, so part of this wage differential, there's going to be a question of how much of that is voluntary versus, how much is that, for some other kind of structural reason.
The perception of attachment to a job also.
Yeah.
That affects women, I think, perceptions of women. Because they're more likely to interrupt their careers to have
Right.
children.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And,
Thank you.
there are copies of the publication outside. I recommend you pick up one on your way out. We now start with our first panel. One of our speakers could not make it. That's why we were a bit sort of generous with our time this morning. So you have three speakers. The first panel is chaired by Amy Wilkinson, a public policy scholar at the Wilson Center, and as I mentioned earlier, a senior fellow at Harvard University. She's currently writing a book on global entrepreneurs, and her research focuses on entrepreneurial leaders across sectors, both men and women. You have her extended bio with you, so I'll stop here. Amy, the floor is yours.
Great. So I'm Amy Wilkinson. You all have a treat in store with the women on this panel. I will say that in the research, just a tiny bit to respond to the facts that we had in the previous presentation, the research on entrepreneurs, especially in the United States, which is mostly my focus, shows that recessionary times are fantastic times to be starting businesses. So a couple companies that you all know, Burger King, MTV, CNN, Disney, etc., all started in the United States in down economies. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. To the women in education point, I graduated from Stanford Business School in 2002, so that's 9 years ago. It's when the tech bubble burst. Everyone thought it was doom and gloom. There was no future of the internet. And Google started 12, 15 miles away from campus. At that time, no one in my business school paid any attention, which is kind of the amazing thing. And now who could live without Google, right? And the successive companies that have come after. So that shows the power of entrepreneurship, certainly in the United States. At one point in time, I started a company exporting art across borders from Latin America. It is even more difficult to do it internationally. And so we definitely have a treat in store in terms of learning, not only in the United States, but internationally. So global entrepreneurs, building products, building organizations, basically shaping our lives as we know it. And I'll start with one fun fact. In 1886, today, on this day of the year, the formula and recipe for Coca-Cola was started, founded, and Coca-Cola moved forward as a company. Started by a pharmacist, John Pemberton. I say that because we have a pharmacist on the panel. Hanan Saab, founder and managing director of PharmaMed. She started as a pharmacist in the American University Hospital in Lebanon. She's also the founder of the MENA Business Women's Network and a number of other networks for women entrepreneurs in particular. She is from Lebanon. Then we've got Tammy Longaberger, and as mentioned, she's the CEO of the Longaberger Company. It's a direct selling company in Ohio, so she's anchoring the U.S. part of this panel. She also chairs the Arab Women's Leadership Institute, and she's the author of this book, Weaving Dreams. Since I'm writing a book, we have to help everyone who writes a book out there in the world at large. So that's Tammy. And then we've got Lena Hondelay, and she has something near and dear to my heart. She's the CEO for printing for the manufacturing of chocolate. So she's in the consumer products world, in the chocolate business. She's also the founder of Rawa Fed. It's a consulting company helping small and medium-sized enterprises from Jordan. So it's an export house and other services helping small and medium-sized businesses. So that is who's on the panel. I'm gonna be a stickler for time. So we give each of these people 15 minutes. I have my iPhone right here with the clock on it, and I'm going to watch it very carefully. The questions that they've been asked to talk about, I'll give them to you all so you can help keep us accountable. What are the particular obstacles, financial, personal, social, institutional, that women entrepreneurs face? What are the advantages of growing your own firm as opposed to working for someone else? What organizations, national, regional, or international, are there to help assist women entrepreneurs? How can public policy help? So we'll do that for 15 minutes each person. Then we have open time for questions. I'll ask a couple questions, but it will really go to the audience, so please be thinking about the questions that you would like to ask. And why don't we start here, actually?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll start there. We'll be entrepreneurial. We'll shift and bob and weave. There you go.
As I was going to say to you, good luck. You gave us wonderful structure, and then you asked three entrepreneurs to speak who have no rules, who don't follow
That's right.
instruction, and creativity just flows.
This will be
So we'll
fun,
do our
and I'm going
best.
to start the clock. Right?
Okay,
yeah,
great,
there we go.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and it is a privilege to be here. I will try to make the case to you that direct selling, I'll tell you a little bit about our family-owned business, but also try to make the case for you in many ways that direct selling is really the answer to some of the challenges that women have in trying to balance their life and take care of their family. It socially works well for people, culturally, even particularly in the Middle East, from a standpoint of selling your product. Because it really tends to be women helping other women be successful with extreme flexibility. And I would say, Mr. Dums, we fall in the category of the self-employed with respect to your statistics. I'll tell you a little bit about our business. We've started in the very, very humble roots. My family are generations. I am fourth generation of basket makers. So you don't have to run GM or start CNN or do even the tech world. We took a very rural handicraft and turned it into a significant business that has helped hundreds of thousands of women around the United States, and I think brought many good things into our customers and our collectors' homes. Certainly had challenges. The company has evolved from a handful of employees to 1,000 employees to date, with 35,000 primarily women across the United States selling our products. We've also, as a course of generational business and succession, we've been a company for about 38 years, transformed from what was really a very male-dominated, manufacturing-focused company to today one that is run by women for women. So I'll tell you a little bit about that and why that has happened. My grandfather was a basket maker in the early 1900s. Baskets were used in Ohio, and he sold in the local community, really to neighbors and friends. Fast forward that a little bit to the early 70s. We talked about, these are pictures of my father, Dave, who I was raised as a woman in the home of an entrepreneur. So we grew up very flexibly. Much changed in our household. I guess I was the beneficiary of my father not having any sons. So he treated me as the son he did not have, and I was raised to work with him and run the business. He put me to work when I was 14 years old in one of his businesses. He also had the idea about the same time to start selling some of his father's baskets, and he believed there was really a market for high quality baskets. And fortunately for those of us who are a part of Longaberger, and some of them are here today, he was right. I joined my dad upon graduating from The Ohio State University 28 years ago, and I've been there. I've only worked with my father, for my father. He passed away about 12 years ago, so I've been running the business since. Today, we're in the business of really providing opportunities for women. Certainly, we preserved our sense of history and values, but we have significantly expanded our product lines beyond baskets to really home and lifestyle. So anything to do with your home, Longaberger's in, primarily the venue of women. We talked about working at home, the value of the domestic work at home, and our products are very naturally suited for the women that are a part of our business. We are leading what we call direct selling company, providing those opportunities for women to become what we refer to as micro entrepreneurs. And that's really what they are. They run their own business from their homes and within their communities. As I mentioned, more than 35,000 of them, generating about $200 million U.S. In sales. And they run their businesses. They are in business for themselves, but the Longaberger Company and its leadership provides products, tools, support, now more than ever via the web. Versus historically it would be very personal and hands-on with other women in their community. I have personal relationships with the majority of our sales force, so it's a very different cultural business than a corporation that you might expect. I mean, some of my friends who work in our business are here today. We travel together, we work together, etc. And I think you will hear a little bit from Lila a little bit later. They're a very different product, but very similar structure in the business that she's helped create in Egypt. If someone were to ask me what we do, it really comes down to three things. Many people, and historically, would say we were a manufacturing company selling baskets. Today, I would say we're a community of people, primarily women, who really care about each other's success. We are a company committed to inspiring very passionate living through this business opportunity that we provide for women. And we are women helping other women be very successful. And I think where this fits so well in my, I've had the privilege of working with women who are interested in being fully involved in civil society in the Middle East. I see so many benefits to this channel of distribution for the Middle East because culturally it fits. Selling in your home, gathering women together in your home, very minimal financial investment required, and it just seems to fit. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Regardless of the region, direct selling prevents tremendous advantages for women. And actually, I won't repeat, Mr. Domes talked about many of those, but a very low investment cost, low risk, discounts on products if you don't have the discretionary income to redecorate your home at full retail, you join our company and the products are a part of what you need to come together to start your business, and you have them for your home as well. There is support every step of the way, and you have an instant, I think it's fair to say, family of women around you who want to help you and want you to be successful. And that's not typical with other jobs that are maybe more traditional corporate jobs. So it's a very different culture. It's seen with some skepticism as a real business. But I'm here to tell you, 35,000 women generating $200 million in sales is pretty good, substantial business. And so for that, we are quite proud. It does take hard work. It does take discipline. Particularly, it's actually, I think it's easier to leave the house and come to work and focus on work versus carving out a space in your home, because there's so many distractions, and they aren't necessarily young children when you're working inside your home. So it does require a disciplined person. And you think about, even in the USA, we've come a very long way since 1963 and the Equal Pay Act. But as we heard, really women earn about 23% less than men, and really, even as a corporation, only 3% of the Fortune 500 companies are there women involved. So we have to find ways, even in the U.S., to advance ourselves economically. So anyway, why do people get involved in direct selling in the U.S.? Certainly there are some women here in the front row that maybe can speak to it with as much credibility as me, but I like to believe that they like the product, and they like being their own boss, working their own hours. They want to supplement their family income. The harder they work, the more money they make. They control their own destiny. They tend to be very social people who are involved maybe in their children, their activities, which engages them with other women as well. These motivate men and women equally, yet women outpace men in this area of, in this method of selling and method of business. Women make up 88% of all United States direct sellers. So women tend to get more from direct selling as well than just the payment of a job well done. They really, what we see get is empowerment, that sense of the intangible, where you build confidence. You have a network of support. So you're not at home alone, feeling like you're on an island, trying to keep life together. And from that relationship, that culture, comes a very important support network. That's very difficult to find for women. We increase capacity of women to make choices and transform them into really outcomes for their life that make a difference. Give women the opportunity to develop confidence. We talk a bit about that. Let me see. And make a difference in the world around them. Women in direct selling often experience tremendous personal growth. It certainly has been my experience. Because of the business that we have been in, it's afforded me the opportunity to be a part of organizations like the Woodrow Wilson Center, and of course my travel and involvement with women in the Middle East. Several women, I can give you some examples. Janie Neen Paul, who's been a part of our business, you can read their quotes. She lives out in Arizona and previously was not in the workforce. Janae Wildman as well is another example out in California. She talks about the advantages of being able to balance her wanting to be with her daughter. It's a choice that she wants to be with her family. And she can also then satisfy some of the desires we have as women to be able to advance ourselves. So, there's not enough hours in a day for us, let alone hours in a week. And you can get some of that through this method of distribution. Barb Arnold, who is in Maine, used to be a school principal. And as she moved into retirement, she was able to do these things. But this mindset extends to society as a whole and ultimately touches the lives of people who have not been involved in direct selling, and it ebbs and flows with as your life changes. This kind of business can go with you. Even if you travel, even if you move, we find a tremendous amount. I don't know what the percentage is because we're not legally allowed to capture it, but my guess is it would be 15 to 20% of the women involved in our business are military spouses. Because as their spouse gets transferred, and you never know when you have to gather up and move, their business can move with them, because I believe that's part of the challenge of women staying involved in the business and labor participation is if their spouse moves and he's the breadwinner, you've got to give up your job and move, or get a divorce and keep your, there's, very difficult decisions that are made as well. So really, my conclusion is that these stories demonstrate the impact of direct selling on women's lives. We do share a common vision, and that is to empower women and change the lives for the better in the process, to live with the realities of the struggles women have, because we may be able to find the answers to Mr. Dome's questions, but we are still, as women, faced with the realities of the obstacles that do exist for us. So those of us who love this business or love this way of life, of us always look beyond the answers and really talk about what gives you meaning. If you have work that is meaningful and it makes a difference in your life and your family's life, that's really what this method of distribution and selling is all about. So we can empower women in so many ways and really be true agents of change. And we do this one life, one family at a time. So thank you.
Bravo, that's at 14 minutes, so you're right under the 15-minute marker. Good
That
job.
was really good for an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
I'll take the extra minute.
you'll take the extra minute. Okay, that's fine. We'll give you the extra minute. So Hanan Saab will be the next to speak. She's going to shift over to the podium, and she is the founder and managing director of PharmaMed.
Good morning. Allow me, please, first to thank the Woodrow Wilson Center and Mrs. Halis Fandiari for providing me with this opportunity to participate in this conference as an entrepreneur on a subject that has all the time been very close to my heart, women and entrepreneurship. My name is Hanan Saab. I come from Lebanon. I'm a third-generation pharmacist. Our business was burned to ashes in 1975 during the Civil War. Pursuant to that, I'm one of 12 founding members who have actually started late in 2006 the Lebanese League for Women in Business, and the founding member of the Middle East and North Africa Businesswomen Network. And I'm going to try to give you an overview which is not only stemming from my own experience, but also from members of our organization, whom I have all along been interacting with, in order to provide you with answers to the questions that we need to address. So, obstacles: financial, personal, social, and institutional. Well, what are the financial obstacles that we generally face? When I started first my business back in the 1991, of course, there were no available loans or funds or programs for women entrepreneurs. And the way it went at the time was that I had to actually go to the family resources. And the bank naturally needs supporting any loan with collaterals. At the time, the percentage that used to be charged for any overdraft facility was around 12% for dollar, as well as 14% for Lebanese pounds. Now, apparently, this really high interest rates in our banking systems have not changed. Currently, it is 8% for the dollar and 10% for the Lebanese pounds, which is really very taxing. So the majority of people go to auto financing, and in growing their businesses, they reinvest whatever comes out of their business earnings back into the company. Now, another issue that is of prime importance, and it really all the time people need to figure out, is the high price of public utilities. Well, when you consider that, for example, we have to pay like 2 invoices for electricity, one because we get the electricity from the government, and the next bill is that of the generators. So we end up actually paying twice. And not only this is of course impacts the type of businesses that one wants to really start, but this is a major one of the factors that people have to take into consideration. Now, one of the major obstacles in Lebanon that obviously push or prompt women to refrain from assuming risks is the instability in Lebanon and the turmoil in the region. I remember when I first shared my thoughts regarding starting my business with other colleagues, they thought that it was such an ill timing. And they thought that I was really irrational vis-a-vis starting my own business. And they wanted to remind me of the fact that when I used to work at the American University Hospital, I used to place my babies in the shelter and go to work. So they told me, what are you doing? You're just jumping into the nowhere zone. What are you going to do when it becomes more of a responsibility? Well, of course, these factors are to date issues of concern to women entrepreneurs, particularly when we take into consideration that, well, 49% of educated ladies and in higher education, university, are ladies. So, well, the biological clock, they have to actually take this into consideration, and their professional aspirations. So at the end of the day, what they get into, are we going to get into a compromise in order to compromise on our self-fulfillment and growth? And this is an aspect that it is all the time in question. I remember like I couldn't sleep at night for 1 year taking this into consideration. What is the kind of risk? What am I getting into? Another major issue is the low level of entrepreneurial skills. I'm a pharmacist, okay, but I'm going to run my business. How about the skills that I need to acquire? I enrolled in different courses, particularly addressing financial management and employee management and employee retention. And currently, I also have a consultant, a financial consultant, as well as an HR consultant, in order to really be on the right track. So these are issues that one has to think of. The social obstacles. Well, we have cultural constraints naturally. Our environment is male-dominated, and men are actually perceived as the main breadwinners. To an extent that women in our own culture, they have the inherent understanding that at times of low unemployment, men have the priority over the women. So if you have like a sister and a brother, no matter who is more capable at home, well, the woman would really think that it is more important for my brother to get into the business because he has a family or whatever that he has to care about. Another issue is that our social weave is really very well constructed on strong family ties. So women are overburdened with social obligations, and very often it's the individual has to really take care not only of the immediate family, sometimes of the aunties, sometimes of the grandparents, which is also needs time allocation, and definitely it falls on it is the burden of the women to spearhead ahead and maintain such relationships. What was funny when I was talking actually to one of our members, a young entrepreneur who has started her business, and I asked her about these cultural constraints and family. She looked at me and she said, you know, Hanan, who is the one who is all the time awakening this guilt feeling that I have all the time regarding my family? And she told me, it's my mother and my mother-in-law. They keep all the time, whenever a member or a child in the family gets sick, well, it's because you have been away, you have not attended to these issues. So this is also one of the issues. Furthermore, I remember once at the beginning when I started my own company, I was visiting the commercial registry in order to do a few things. And I met there a lawyer who is a friend of my husband. And he looked at me and he said, well, you shouldn't be coming here. It's not a place for women to come here. You should have allocated this to me. So there was also a look about, wow, there is a source of social association. Where do you come from? You shouldn't be in actual places. And I remember at the time when I started the business, I had to go to the customs with the pharmaceutical inspectors, and it was all men in a steel structure where I really felt odd being there. And I felt that everybody was really looking at me. What is this lady doing here in such a structure? So this is really a sort of an issue that makes you all the time want to take into consideration. Not to mention the underestimation of women's skills. I mean, up to this date, whenever I go to a discussion on business issues, and in many instances I have like males with me who are on the team, and we go along. And funny enough, during the discussion, the people, and mostly they are men, they tend to address the man, and they just looking at me, even though I'm the owner and I'm the one who is supposed to be doing some decisions. And so this is also, these are issues that you have to all the time sort of prepare yourself psychologically before going into such context. Well, the institutional and the institutional obstacles, women all the time consider that there are administrative and regulatory barriers that they really have to overcome. I remember the first time back in 1994 when I was participating in a public bid. And I spent like 1 month studying every step that I had to. I wrote down everything because I heard that many people get discredited if they don't actually submit all the papers. And here I was when this bid was in the process of being opened. I was the only lady with a group of men who were sitting there. The gentleman who was opening the bid he was one of the regulations was if there is an only bidder, you're not allowed to open the envelope. So this guy was opening the envelope, and these men who were sitting down there, though they were only bidders, they didn't object until the time came when he was going to open the envelope. And all of a sudden I raised my hand and I told him, please sir, you are violating the law. I can sue you for that. And everybody looked, what's happening? I told him, well, I'm an only bidder and you cannot do that. This is against the law. We ended up going to the Director General of this section, and I was arguing, and actually I told him that this is against the practice and I can sue all of you here. He looked at me and he said, how many products are you actually fighting for? I told him I'm just running for one product. And he looked at me, well, lady, you're going to have so many more in the future. So this was really an issue that where, as you know, in our part of the world, there is so much of corruption and lack of transparency, and women hate this. In our organization, so many times, ladies, we talk together and they would tell us, well, I have a problem in this institution. How would you go about really overcoming this? And we tend to give them advice just to really see, because no there is a sort of, I would like to say that there is more resistance on the part of ladies to really indulge in any atmosphere where you would have corruption and lack of transparency. The employment laws, they are a hindrance because you cannot hire and fire as much as you would want. So this is also an issue. And of course, whenever you are in an institution or a public sector, it is all the time that you might want sometimes to actually hire a maid for a particular job because you might not be actually as successful because of the gender discrimination as that of a male undertaking this responsibility. So how do we grow our businesses? And what's the difference between one's own boss, being our own boss, and an employee? I have to say that for me, it was much more better self-fulfillment and an unprecedented empowerment at different levels. I would say financial, personal, because of the spectrum of activities that one gets exposed to once you are your own boss. I'm not undermining the learning opportunity that an employee would really go for. This is taken for granted, and if I were to really advise, provide any advice, I would say that the best bet would be for someone to really start an employee, learn from others, and then start one's own business. But I tend also to think that I sort of juggle better with my work-life balance, being my own boss. And one thing more that I would like to share with you is that I thrive with challenges, and I have the understanding that we as business ladies have to become stronger in order to form an economic power so that men and societies start listening to us. Otherwise, if we are not strong, and I refer to economic empowerment, we might not be as heard as strong. And another issue regarding the personal empowerment and with what's going on in the world right now, with the conflict that's going on, the sectarianism, I believe that we have a role, first of all, to bridge this gap by being mothers who would not want this conflict to take place, and because we suffer most. So this is why we might be at an advantage to bind societies and actually make a conflict less and less between the different issues. Economically also, I think that once we have our own businesses, it would be better and we will be more privileged to actually mentor other younger ladies who want to start their own businesses. Women entrepreneurs, what are the type of assistance that we can provide them with? We have currently a number of associations in Lebanon, banks. Luckily, they do not provide any gender discrimination. And lately, with the Central Bank of Lebanon having an overflow of funds during the financial crisis because it was a stable place, and we actually have not suffered from this issue, the Central Bank took an initiative in order to really push banks into giving loans that were at very reasonable interest rates, and this was just recently before I came. So the banks will be in a position to sort of help with a 3% interest on a project that is submitted for growth. There is also the kafalat, also Badr, and these are Lebanese angels. There are certain, the MIT competition and Cartier awards, as well as Endeavor as an international association. Capacity building, I have to say that the Lebanese League for Women in Business have provided so much of capacity building in terms of giving instructions and workshops regarding employee management, skill building, and networking among the members to really create collaborations and joint ventures. Beritech is an institution that provides incubators and training with limited financial support. Now, how to move forward? Well, there is a great list, a long list of this. Of course, it's regional and local stability, encouragement of good governors, reforms in energy, and a major issue is that I, as a business owner, I don't have the privilege that my husband has in terms of tax allocation. I'm taxed more because he is the breadwinner, and there we have to deduct a certain amount because he is the family, the head of the family. One of the other issues is flexible timing, creation of public incentives, nurseries, partnerships between public and sectors in order to reward women and entrepreneurs, and maybe give an incentive to these organizations that have women a high percentage of women employed during the financial crisis. A research was made where it was found that women, organizations who had women on their boards suffered less. So this is a recipe for a successful structure, and this is why governments should really be encouraging on employment of women and having them on board. Not to mention, of course, the loans with the low interest rates. And thank you. I hope I have been successful in giving you some kind of an overview about everything that you would have wanted to listen. Thank you very much.
And finally, we've got Lina Handele, and she is the CEO of Printing for the Manufacturing of Chocolate, as well as the founder of Rawafed, and is from Jordan.
Yes. My background, my education is nutrition, and I come from a middle-class family that believe in quality of education. My parents started one of the most prominent schools in Jordan, the National Orthodox School, where we were raised that education is the key for success. So I was working in a German company, and after the Gulf crisis, they decided to close the office in Jordan. I was faced with two options: either to start my own business or to work as an employee. I had a vision that I want to start my own business. And the first idea that came to my mind was starting a chocolate factory, because I am chocoholic, and everybody started laughing. To start, your education is nutrition. I didn't take any course in management or finance or anything. But I saw light at the end of the tunnel. I saw success. I said, why not to start it? And I will start collecting information where, if in the middle of collecting this information I found out that it will not be feasible, then I will stop. But I will not stop from now, because the competition is fierce, because my competitors are giant, and because all this. So I decided to pursue my dream. And I started looking to buy the know-how, to buy the recipe, because I know nothing about the manufacturing. So I started collecting information from embassies around around Jordan, who is ready to sell me this know-how. You know, nobody was able to discuss it, because Jordan is a small country. So to start a joint venture in a country that our population is 5 or 6 million, nobody even answered my questions. It did not give me, it did not set me back until I said I will get the information that really it's not feasible. So I started digging for information. I found a company in Cyprus that they are willing to start this joint venture. So I went to Cyprus with one goal, that I will impress them, that they will start this joint venture. And even I told my husband to come with me to Cyprus. Till now, he doesn't know how did he accept to come with me to Cyprus to discuss this issue. So I found in Jordan one book about the manufacturing of chocolate. So I read it, so that I speak their language. When they say cocoa butter, I will say, yes, cocoa butter. The terminology that I will speak their language to impress them. So I went with only, as if there is nothing called failure in the dictionary. I insisted that I will impress them. really I impressed them, and he was our shareholder. And till now, I don't forget what he told me, that I was impressed by your drive. And we started discussing starting a factory in Jordan. You know, I was faced, wow, to start this. And they wanted me to be the manager of this company. How to be a manager? So I had really to be frank with myself, to do a SWOT analysis. What I know, what needs to be done. Oh my God, really I was faced with what to do. Really, I panicked. I said, no, I will look at my weaknesses, try to change them to strengths, and whatever I cannot change, then I will have people to help me. It's a team. We need to succeed. You know, it took us only 1 year to start producing the first bar of chocolate. In Jordan at that time, we only had inferior quality of chocolate. Nobody was producing real chocolate. What I mean by real chocolate is starting using cocoa butter and cocoa mass. And I insisted that I would produce high quality chocolate. And it was the only Jordanian chocolate that it was on the shelf with the giants, which are Jacob's Sushar, Cadbury's Galaxies. I found a place for me with these giants. We were producing in the beginning only 3 kinds of chocolate, and the capacity of our production was 0.5 ton per day. 10 years later, we were producing 60 kinds of chocolates. Our capacity was 4 tons, and I was exporting 60% of my production. You know, my country at that time gave me success, and I faced a lot of challenges. Most of the challenges were the finance. I didn't have the money, and I went to the 3 Fs, which were the friends, families, and fools, that they gave me the money. And I had to work so hard in order to succeed. But the most challenge which I was faced, that the quality of the perception of the Jordanian chocolate was very inferior. So I had to change this mindset of people. I did a study for them. I said, listen, you know, I brought the Cadbury's, the Galaxies, the Jacob's Sushar, all of these chocolates. I melted them and I molded them in the same mold, and I gave them to people. I said, listen, which is best? So when I gave them only numbers without knowing in their minds that this is brands, nobody said that my chocolate was the worst. Until when I gave them, I told them, this is Cadbury's, this is the Today chocolate. My brand was called Today. So I gave them the idea that, you know, because you knew that this is my chocolate, you said that the brands are much better when you didn't know. So just to emphasize that I am working in a high quality chocolate. So the competition was fierce. My marketing capacity and my financials were not up to the giants, but still I existed. And I could see what will happen in Jordan, that Jordan signed the free trade agreement with the US, the Euro-Jordanian partnership, and the Arab trade agreement. So I said, listen, if this will be signed, then I will lose a lot of my marketing share. So I had to find solutions to what will happen before it happened. So I diversified in my products, I diversified in my markets. I produced niche products, such as the diabetic low-calorie chocolate, the dragees, which is nuts covered with chocolate, and even I diversified in the size of the chocolate so that to cater for more consumers. But this was not enough for me. I felt that I had no mentor. I had nobody to help me, to try to help me succeed. So I said I would like to be very active in the civil society. So I was the president of the Young Entrepreneurs Association and the president of INJAZ, which is Junior Achievement Affiliate, where we want to help startups, the youth, to believe in themselves, to see the other side of optimism. We want them to be more positive. So I was very active in women issues and entrepreneurs. And we were lobbying, advocating with our governments that SME, small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurships are the key to our problems, are the key to the unemployment, are the key to economic prosperity. But unfortunately, till now, we did not succeed. Our government still, they see big players, that they want these big players. And even though they should know that the big players cannot hire a lot of employment. So we as entrepreneurs, we think out of the box. We are proactive, we are creative, we are innovative. We can create different, we can diversify in our production, in our economy. This is part of what's about my career path, and what I see, the support of women still, it's scattered efforts. Still, they are bringing a recipe, one recipe to every country, which doesn't work. We need to look at the specifics, and if we have specifics in every country, we have our own needs, our own priorities in every country. We cannot, not one recipe fits all. So we need to have really more ideas about what needs to be done and what to do. I want to look at
you have 5 minutes.
Yes, and I want just to give an idea. I had some studies to look at women realities, and I found some ideas that women tend to be more risk averse than men due to constraints in mobility, which may increase the risk of failure. Businesses tend to be smaller in terms of employment and turnover, operate on a part-time basis and from home. Lower ratios of debt finance and are less likely to access private equity or venture capital. A startup spend less time engaged in activity related to acquiring finance. Women are more likely to use credit debts as a source of startup capital. Disadvantages in accessing network and credit. Men are more likely to use their networks and a greater variety of funding sources. Lack of supportive infrastructure. Women entrepreneurship is underutilized. Women start with only 1/3 as much capital as men and are less likely to use external financing as the business grows. Women better repayment records should translate into improved access to credit. Percent of firms with female participation in ownership in the MENA region is 20%. OECD is 32%. Female labor force participation rates in MENA is 28%, which is the lowest. All data and research available states that at the startup stage, women's businesses tend to be undercapitalized relative to their male counterparts, are less likely to access external finance, may experience gender-specific obstacles that create a perception that accessing finance is a barrier. As female investors only represent 8% of the total investor population in the USA, it's viewed an untapped potential for growth finance. Legal, social, and cultural norm associates higher risks with investment in women-owned businesses. Statistics on the number of women entrepreneurs and women's economic participations are often unavailable or incomplete. We lack consistent and comparable data that has a time series element and that allows us to look specifically at entrepreneurial finance by gender. Women-led businesses tend to have shorter banking relationships than male-led businesses. Women tend to make greater use of deposit accounts and grants. There is little knowledge about women business incubation and women entrepreneurs at large. What needs to be done? Should find ways about the valuable role women can play in mainstream economic activity. Review existing programs and funds that provide access to financing. Access the status of business development support. Provide recommendations about the state of access to finance for women entrepreneurs. Identify where gaps exist. Financial institutions should have loan staff that understand the opportunities. Provide information on women business incubation around the world. Enhance the role of women entrepreneurs through business incubation. Promote the sharing knowledge about women incubation. Generate knowledge outputs that help to build the capacity of existing business incubators targeting women entrepreneurs. summarize region-specific challenges for women, establish a foundation for strengthening cooperation and network building between women globally, learn about global project organizations and network building. The recommendations I found: wealth and social justice, creative ideas, the time is now, create solution to the most pressing problems, not accept status quo, need to take action, increase number of change makers, work to reinvent itself, stimulate our creativity, expanding in knowledge-driven sectors, not concentrated in traditionally female sectors, which has low value added and low employability and growth, web-based entrepreneurship, government contracts, access to markets, awareness about existing resources and capacity building tools, economic diversification and building network, business partnership and trade linkages. And at the end, I would like to share with you a quotes that helped me move forward. Better to aim at a star than to shoot down at a well. You'll hit higher. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Michelangelo said, the great danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. Vince Lombardi said, the price of success is hard work, dedication to the job at hand, and the determination that whether we win or lose, we have applied the best of ourselves to the job at hand. Luis Carlos said, if you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there. I leave you with the final wisdom by Martin Luther King Jr. Excellence is the best antidote for racism. I think the same is true for chauvinism, so let's all go out and be excellent, and thank you.
Thank you. So we've got 30 minutes of time. Obviously, phenomenal entrepreneurs who are women as well. I will start off with a couple questions, but please be thinking about what questions you would like to ask the panel generally or one of the individuals specifically. So to kick it off, and this will go to the panel at large, entrepreneurs spot opportunities that others don't see. They see gaps, they see vacuums. What do you do to do that? I mean, what advice would you have for seeing something each one of you did? Why don't you start?
Okay. Actually, when I started the chocolate factory, it was the time of the devaluation of the Jordan dinar. And everybody said, oh my God, this is not the time to invest. I looked at the opportunity that we did not have good quality chocolates in Jordan, and the devaluation of the Jordan dinar, it's that it will help me start my investment with less cost. So I looked at it as an opportunity, which others looked at it as a threat. So entrepreneurs see things, the positive side of things, look at the threats as opportunities, look at weaknesses as that they can change it to strength, and to believe in self and to persevere and to believe that this dream can come true, and it cannot come true without hard work. You need to believe and to have the confidence and to be ambitious and to be positive and to be the change engine for your business, and to adapt to change very quickly, because as Darwin said, survival for the fittest. If you are fit, if you are, then you will survive.
Okay. Others?
Go ahead. I guess I was so caught up in what you were saying, I couldn't figure out a way to say it any better. I guess my perspective would be that I came into this business as a daughter of an entrepreneur. So for many years I watched someone else, and perhaps there's someone in your life that you watch and maybe are even somewhat afraid of because they do such crazy things. And you think, oh my gosh, I could never do that. It's unorthodox, etc. And I guess I would say to you, as I have walked this path, is as women particularly, you have to learn to walk into your fear. Because that thing that you fear the most is probably the very door you need to push yourself through. And at the end of the day, no one else is going to push you through it. My father taught me a very important lesson. I was in college, and I was having a very bad day. You know, I wish I had the problems I had in college, right? But I called him and I said, I need you to come up and talk to me. I need you to come and take me out to dinner and help me through this problem. And he said, what? And I repeated myself, and he said, I'm not coming to dinner with you. I'm not driving 1 hour to take you out to dinner. He said, and I'll tell you why. Because someday I will not be here. And you're going to have to learn to reach behind yourself and pick your own self up and move yourself forward. So you figure it out tonight. Good luck. But I've never forgotten that because it has come true so many times. And I think, to your point, you just have to do it yourself.
I think it's on.
That's on.
Well, for me, it's actually different. I started the business myself, and I actually spotted an opportunity for me to start the business. I was at the American University Hospital, and it was the toughest time of war. And there were militiamen all over. And at the time, the cancer treatment has been focused on. So I spotted that there was an opportunity in this field particularly, and in patient control analgesia. Now, patient control analgesia has a very specific objective, which is a better patient life. So I embarked on starting my own business with actually importing narcotics at a time that no one wanted to deal with this. So I cannot tell you how stressful it was. I had to, I remember that I went and I bought a very big safe. And the first consignment, I drove with the driver himself to put it in the safe. And of course, I was aware of the dangers because I used to work at the American University Hospital, and very often people used to come and ask us, sometimes under arms, to give them things that were not belonging to us. So I had this resiliency, and actually I psychologically prepared myself for going the extra mile because I wanted to get into this field. And I wanted to avail very important medication to the patients, but at the same time, it was risky. So entrepreneurs have to take the risk. You have to put it into your system, and you have to have other scenarios. Another instance that I can think of was actually in the war 2006. In 2006, we were all, there was a siege on Lebanon. And one of the items that we deal with is chemotherapy for patients. So at the time, we had a limited supply. Our supply was getting drained, and the patients needed to get the next cycle of their medication. So what did we do? We imported the medication via Jordan to Syria to Lebanon. We were the first company to import this. There is no insurance during wartime, as you all know. But the end result to get and avail this medication, for me, was legitimate to take the risk. It was a high risk, and luckily, I mean, the medication arrived and not one patient missed his own treatment. So this was a great challenge. My employees know that we will all the time take the extra mile in order to make things done. This is probably the recipe.
Okay, to follow up with that, knowing the risks exist, and they exist regardless of which business you're in, what do you do to face the challenge? And what advice do you have to others? I heard different people saying, I read up a lot, or I get a lot of information, or I have confidence in my team, but what is it you do to manage risk?
Well, I think there are many business examples and all kinds of things to read and follow. My advice that you can't usually read about or grasp is, or easily on Google, is that particularly for women, we are so spread out with not only, more than likely, both of the women that you were starting their own business and you're starting your entrepreneurial risk, you still have the responsibilities at home that you have to take care of. So how do you do all these things is guiltlessly take time to take care of yourself. Because you can't take care of anyone else. You can't start any business if you don't take care of yourself. And that, as women, we don't do that very well. But it is very important because if you're not healthy in body and mind, it does not give you the time to and the energy to do some of the other things you need to do. So it's usually a little unorthodox, and I'm sure there'll be other ideas from a business standpoint. But it's so true.
Actually, the risk I took was, for me, it was very huge. Well, I got married. We were married, and me and my husband, and I had a small daughter, and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have even money because when we got married, we were in love in university. He didn't have the money. We went to our friends, our families. You want to give us presents? Give us the house, let's say, because we could not get married at that time. So everybody said, listen, if you lose this money, you have a child. And definitely what to do. I had, my salary was good and I had a very good business. So I said, listen, I will not lose the money. I will try to have a calculated risk, study the risk, and try to minimize it as much as possible. I would look at try to change this risk, to try to find ways in order of this risk to be minimal. Definitely it cannot go, but you can reach in a way that if it needs, I was working 18 hours from 24. I am a workaholic, not only chocoholic, but workaholic. I was working hard. I did so many courses. I took so many workshops, seminars. I asked information. I gathered information. So if I had all these recipes for success, so definitely my failure or the risk will be minimal because I tried to get what needs to be done and not a single thing I didn't do in order to minimize the risk. If you do your homework, definitely you will minimize it and you will succeed. But we need to do our homework. We need to be honest with ourselves and we need to do a SWOT analysis. If I cannot do it, I will stop. Nothing. It's not, we will not take it personal. We will not take it that really it's a setback. So if we do everything, we've got the information, we do everything, I don't think that this calculated risk will be a constraint in the success. But definitely it's a risk. And my luck, which for me, I don't consider it luck. I consider it that part of it was luck at that time because the Jordanians, they like the English chocolates a lot. And it gave me a smaller time for people to try my chocolate because at that time, the English chocolate was not allowed to come to Jordan because of the mad cow disease. I took it as an opportunity. Oh my God. So this is the time that people will try my chocolate because the Cadbury's is not there. So I grasped this opportunity in my hands, in my whatever name it, so for people to try it. So this was part of what happened. I saw it coming and, we knew that it will come and I was very near to start my chocolate. So I was quicker to start my chocolate so that I will get the time where people will try my chocolate because there is not English chocolate.
Mm-hmm. I want to interject here. So Lena's using SWOT analysis. I've heard it a couple times. For those that don't know, it's a business lingo. So we talked about the languages of different companies and businesses. Yeah. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So this is a real serious self-analyzation of where you're strong and where you're not, and what to do about it. So next question, and I'm going to start with Hanan, and this is specific to women entrepreneurs now. What happens, you mentioned at some points being underestimated. I'm curious what you do as a woman, and women are smaller in number. I mean, we know entrepreneurs are smaller in number than those in the business world at large. Women entrepreneurs are an elite group within that group. So what happens when you're underestimated? How do you respond?
Well, there is actually, I cannot say that there is a recipe for this. What I would say is that if one is faced with such a situation, to really take it from a scientific aspect and outline whatever is underlying in the business that one is proposing, to an extent that once you go to the data and address these and show the people that you are dealing with that you really actually know the business and you know what you're talking about, and put some proposals to see if they are attending to 1, 2, 3. You call their attention to aspects that somehow they might not have attended to. It's there that one would start thinking that you are actually adding another dimension that they haven't actually addressed, and they would feel, well, this lady is serious and she knows the business. So it's all the time the challenge that you would come out with some kind of an alert point to the person who is really facing you, to make him really know that whatever you're talking about is very well thought of. I just need to add one comment regarding the risk. Actually, I feel very bad actually when Lena talks about her chocolate, because it's so nice and one loves it. Whereas I'm talking about medication that is not so much attractive to people. But I have to say that, and naturally, because I come from a region, Lebanon has been on the news, for the past 30 years. So it became inherent that we have to all the time put other scenarios, plan B. So all the time, I would like to recommend teamwork, SWOT analysis and teamwork. And I tell my employees, one head cannot be better than so many. Lately, we have actually gone into policies and procedure in every single step of the tasks that we undergo, whether it's financial, distribution, medication, etc. And one of the things is risk. What do we do in terms of risk aversion, another plan. So this is going into our manuals, into our policies and procedures, and the employees have to get trained periodically on these issues in order for them to really handle them properly. There will be probably instances that come out of the box, which we cannot control. But by covering most of these, we will be actually on the right track. Now, we are also qualifying to be accredited for general distribution and storage practice for pharmaceutical products, which is a new direction by the World Health Organization. And this is a sort of a benchmarking that you are actually secure more or less in whatever you are doing. Encourage teamwork and SWOT analysis. And the young generation, with their creativity, sometimes they come with so many ideas that really they make a lot of difference. So I think that this is what we really have to concentrate on.
Great.
Sorry for the underestimation. It's very important that in the beginning, maybe they underestimate us, but when we are prepared and we know what we are doing and we do our homework, they cannot accept that they really listen to us. But if we are not prepared, definitely they will underestimate our skills and our...
The underestimation is something that I'm sure we've all lived with our entire life. Somehow, some way, it happens. I guess that is the advantage of owning your own business. Is it's their choice to their detriment if they underestimate you, because if you own your own business, you control either A, who works for you or who doesn't, and B, also who your company does business with. Because, I had to, as a young woman, I resented it and I resisted it and I tried to demonstrate how smart I was until I met someone who told me, Tammy, you've got it all wrong. When usually men underestimate you, it's okay. Like, let them. Because that's when they tell you more information. Mm-hmm. Because if they think you're not smart enough to comprehend it, they tend to try to impress you with how smart they are. And you can ask so many more questions. Really? Oh, I didn't know. Well, then you ask more follow-up questions and you leave with all of the information and you can just smile and thank them.
Okay, let me open it up to the audience for questions. Holly.
I'm Holly Spandieri. So, two very short questions to all three panelists. First of all, what is the number of women you employ,
Mm-hmm.
and in your
Business.
And secondly, can you talk a little bit about your competitions and how you deal with them, because this is very important, and the problem of corruption in the Middle East, probably in the States too, but I mean, I come from the region, so I focus on that, and kickbacks, and how do we deal with that? Thanks.
Actually, a number of women in the chocolography, we have mostly 90% are women, and in the consulting, where this consulting that we are helping small, medium enterprises to export to the EU and to the US through doing the market access, market requirements. Also, we have one male and the rest are females. And I am starting a new chocolate factory because I sold my share in the old factory because they don't want, my shareholders were traditional, so I wanted to do something new. So still, we will have women, but basically we will have the majority will be males because it's machinery, but for the finesse we need women to work there. But mostly if I will find female for the job, I try to hire females. My competitors were giants, and it was really, for me, it was unequal competition because they had the marketing, the financials, etc. But for me, in order to stay in the market, in order not to die, to be there with these big giants, I had to find ways for people to try my chocolate. For instance, when I was exporting, I was telling my exporter, my agent, listen, I don't have the capabilities to put ads in the satellites or to give you more discounts, but what I can give you in every order to have free tastings, let people taste my chocolate and then decide. So I find through my small budgets, through my small expertise in this with the giants, that I find ways to be there and to compete with them. It was not easy. It was very difficult. It was very hectic. But people, they know the taste. You cannot give them something with good quality and they say, I don't want to buy it. So quality is really important, and after-sales service is really important if you want to beat your competition. You need to be a leader in the market and not follower. If you are follower with the competitors, definitely you will be a second class in that company. If you are known to have a vision and to work with your vision, definitely you will find ways to compete with this. I try to use the blue ocean, not the red ocean. The blue ocean, for me, I'd like to look at myself as Cirque du Soleil. After they find that the circus is not moving in the right direction, they said, we don't care for the competition, we will find a niche product for us. So for me, I don't care for the competition. I will try to find a niche product that it will be different. You know, in the chocolography, I created a demand for something didn't exist earlier. People didn't know that they want to personalize their gifts. So I created something new. So the competition, I took the blue ocean competition. I didn't go to the bloody competition, the red ocean, with the other existing brand names like the patches, these chocolates. But really, I created something new. My competition was not only the chocolate, they were the flowers, the perfumes, etc. So it was a new demand that I created. For me now, I considered in Jordan #1 in this market, where nobody knew that. I even didn't know that there is a demand, but I wanted to be different. And I asked myself, before I started the venture, why people will come to my shop and buy from me and not to go to Patches or the big players. So I found answers, and the answers were, I have a unique product, I know the mentality of the people, and I am different. I am trying to create a new demand for people. So this was, you can leave the competition, care less of the competition, but you should know the competition in order to proceed. And the corruption, it's really a mess. For instance, in our country, if you look at Jordan, that our debts were in 2004 were 7 billion Jordan dinars, and now it's 11 billion. And even though we sold our harbor, we sold our the Royal Jordanian, so everything is sold, and still we don't see the money coming. The corruption is really huge, and I hope that the leadership of our country will find ways to have our money back to our government and to try to minimize as much as possible. But till now, it's an issue that we need to solve. If it's not solved, I hope, and we don't want that what happened in other countries to happen in our country.
Okay, can we have quick responses on this question? And then we've got a whole lot of questions. So
Well, regarding my type of business, I have 77% of the employees are ladies, and they are heads of departments. I provide them with flex time and the possibility to work from home. Regarding the competition, what we do is we invest a lot in training our employees. We have consultants, and we go all the time for niche products and niche approaches. Regarding the corruption, we are actually aware that there are certain practices that are done by our competitors. We personally abide by the Foreign Corruption Practice Act. We do not at all involve in such activities. Our activities are actually catered at the level of maybe continuing education. This is how we market our activities, and providing some kind of institutional grants that people benefit from. And it's up to the doctors to really either appreciate this or not. We are not going to go their way. We are setting our own standards. It might not be appealing to the majority due to the practices that are there, but we are in no way actually involved in such practices.
Tammy?
In our corporation and our manufacturing of our baskets, we have 500 women who are employees and 500 men. So it's very close. In our sales force of the 33,000 people out there, 30,000 are women, 3,000 are men, primarily gay men who are involved in the business. As far as competition, for baskets, handmade in America, very little competition, but we compete for people's time, we compete for their discretionary income, and we compete with other storage containers.
Okay, I would like to honor the brave gentleman in the back.
Yeah.
Thank you. As a sheikh, I'm asking about the fanatic religious leaders and in the mosques. Are they a big challenge for you?
Leaders in mosques, are they? I don't know if I understood.
Religious fanatic leaders and yes.
Okay.
Because they prefer the woman to keep the woman at home, not to be. at the
Okay,
market.
so the influence of religion, is this an impediment to women? Women entrepreneurs?
Maybe to some extent, but it's outside of Amman. We actually are asking the help of the imam in the mosque in order for to have their to help us feel that women can work, and the religion is not against women working, but it's not an issue in Jordan. And we even are trying to get their help to help us have an awareness with the males counterparts that it's done. And even in the Muslim times of Prophet Muhammad, that woman was working. So we need their help to help us have the awareness with the male counterparts.
Okay.
Well, in Lebanon, actually, this is rather limited. And I have to say that our best bet to counteract this is by educating women. And the fact that we enjoy a high percentage of ladies who are educated in our society, they do understand that this is a sort of maneuvering with the religion, because the religion does not actually dictate on a woman not to work. Actually, our Prophet Muhammad, his wife Khadija, had her own business, and he used to take money from her. So by setting this example, I mean, people who are open-minded and who are actually real practitioners and follow the religion, they know this for a fact. Now, of course, there are people who stay on the edges, who would like to go for these approaches, but definitely we are standing by in order to really not make this common. And we don't face this in Lebanon.
Okay, other questions? The woman here in the green jacket in the middle.
I'm sorry, do you mind passing? Okay, thank you all for fascinating observations. One thing that struck me, each one of you is engaged in larger organizations, whether it's a league of entrepreneurs or junior achievement. And the idea was mentioned of going out to civil society, getting engaged. I'd like you to talk about how that's impacted your work in your world, and certainly the issue of international agreements on free trade and economic development have really been crucial. I should say I'm Mindy Reiser. I'm a sociologist. I've worked in Central Asia on economic development, and these are some issues that are relevant there too.
Okay, I want to say, can we have quick answers?
Yes.
We have 5 minutes, so I'd like to take a couple additional questions, but we'll answer this.
I think being involved outside of your business is very important, particularly if you own your own business. You have to be deliberate about learning. And also, as your business grows, how do you learn how to run a larger business? Well, you can do that and supplement that by being involved in larger, broader organizations, which, at least for me, taught me consensus building, which from an entrepreneurial father, you don't learn that. It's not required, consensus building.
Well, for me, actually, it was a passion that I have developed. I feel that I will be much more fulfilled through organizations like the Lebanese League for Women in Business. I rejoice when I sort of give pieces of advice to other younger ladies, and I believe that this is a sort of empowerment. Ladies, whenever they are in such groups, they support each other, they help each other, they get inspired, they feel your successes and they want to do the same. And due to the conviction that I have that women are important tools for change and bringing better understanding of the world and compassion, I believe that this is very important. And I believe that women organizations have a lot to play, a role as women entrepreneurs, and I keep on emphasizing an economic role is the way forward for better empowerment.
Great. Ina?
Actually, the challenges and the setbacks that we were faced, you don't want startups to face it. So it's in your blood as an entrepreneur to be a social entrepreneur, to share your experiences, to share your success tips, to share your pitfalls. So definitely sharing, it gives you the self, the satisfaction that you are inspiring and helping others. Because if you do that, then the economy at large will be in a better case, in better situation in your country.
Okay, let me take these. There are 3 questions. We'll take them all, and then we'll let each person respond to one. So start with the woman in the white jacket, and then come forward.
Ariane Hegewisch, Institute for Women's Policy Research. I wanted to take the question on how many women you employ further. Are you different as employers, or what differences did you make, given that most of you worked, or 2 of you worked for other people before, or are you just a normal employer and can't afford to be very different?
Okay, yes, sir. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Rosemary Seguero. I'm the president of Seguero's International Group and also president for Hope for Tomorrow, which focus on empowering women through microfinance. I want to thank Ms. Sela so much for her wonderful events. I attend most of her events here because they are wonderful, and wonderful speeches from you women who have given me inspiration. I'm from Kenya. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and what you said was very, very true. When I'm here as a businesswoman, my business is coffee, but I go around, what do I do? Starbucks is there, Carib is there. Whom am I competing, Chand? I come back again. So thank you so much for your inspiration. And my question is, where do you import your cocoa from? Can I import?
Okay, and Sonia?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something that sort of a little bit what Hale asked. I mean, we've talked about external competition, but from Tammy, I got the sense that when you kept talking about how the women who work for you all support each other. So there seems to be not competition within your organization, and Hanan and Lena too. I mean, you have so many women working for each other. Do you think as women, have you consciously or unconsciously developed, what role does internal competition play in your organizations? And have you, consciously tried to develop a different way of getting your employers to work together?
Okay, so on the first question of working for others or working for yourself, you would like to take that? Okay, go.
Oh, the first, no, I was going to take
Or you'll
Sonia's.
take this, Sonia.
Yeah,
Okay, answer to Sonia's, and then we'll
Okay,
back up.
Sonia, I think you will find that there is intense competition among our sales force in a friendly way. Everyone wants to be number one, and we do encourage that, but we hope we do it in a fun way. I'm sure you can find some exceptions to that, but it really is about the spirit of everyone wins. I hope does that answer your question? Yeah. Of course you leverage it, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and then let's roll questions 1 and 2 to you, which is it different to work for others than work for yourself? You've done both. I know you were at a German company. And the cocoa question.
The cocoa, I will start with
the
the
last
cocoa.
question for you.
The cocoa, I buy it from Holland because Holland is number one. They buy the cocoa beans from either the Ivory Coast or from Ghana or there, and then it is transformed to cocoa butter, cocoa mass. So Holland is number one for the cocoa butter, cocoa mass. But the cocoa beans, it comes from all over. But now we have it's really a problem with the Ivory Coast. 60% of the production in the whole world is from the Ivory Coast, and because of the war, civil war, we are facing huge price raise, and we don't have any cocos nowadays. It's a problem. And working as your question, because you are your own boss, you can create your time and the flexibility of your time accordingly. When I was working as an employee and I had kids, it was really very strict that I need to work from, let's say, 8 till 4 or till 5, because our labor law doesn't give us the law for flexible or part-time or something. So it was very difficult. But now, because you are your own boss, definitely you arrange your time according to your priorities. So it's much easier, but definitely you need to pass by that way. You need in your career path to be working as an employee and then to start your business, because what you get is more than you get while you start your own business. And is there any other?
That's it. And not to leave Hanan out, the question on next generation of women entrepreneurs, do you see it looking differently, and how?
I have great faith in the next generation. And this is why I believe that the recipe for this is to have